I was asked to talk about efficiency, and you've made some comments about efficiency already, in fact, stressing public involvement. And you know, one of my questions was about strategic planning. For two reasons I asked that. One, it's a way to engage citizens, which you've talked about, but it is also a way to push priorities and develop priorities. So it has those dual aspects of involving people and eventually setting priorities and establishing your own vision. And so in that context, I wonder what you think about the fit of strategic planning in Atlanta and whether it would help.
I think the use of strategic planning would be exceptional in the city of Atlanta. It would give us the opportunity to look at not only our current state, but what challenges we see on the horizon and how we can address them as a community. Oftentimes we have planned in the city of Atlanta, but we have not implemented. We've had work done by previous administration. We've had great work done by consultants. I think Bain did the vast majority of the work during this administration. But we have not pulled all of that together, coordinated the planning that has been done, and we certainly haven't implemented it in a rather holistic manner. So from my perspective, strategic planning is an exceptional tool that should be used in the city.
All right, thank you. And a part of that is ultimately to set a vision and set priorities. How do you feel about that? One might speculate that problems in the past broke down at the setting priorities hurdle of this is what I think we're going to do, and that is not something we're going to do. How do you feel about the need of a mayor to make that decision?
Well, I think that is an important part of the mayor's job, but it is not the mayor's job alone. We have a community that is very engaged, manifested here today. People are very interested in where we are going as a city. As a leader, I have a vision for the city. I want a clean, affordable, safe environment for every citizen that lives in the city, works in the city, or for those who are coming to visit our city. That means we've got to be financially stable, we've got to be safe, we've got to feel safe and be actually safe in our city. So setting a vision and being able to bring folks along to have them understand that this is something that's important to all of us, that we need their perspective and their insight, I think is absolutely critical. But yes, it's important for the mayor to have a vision for the city, for the priorities to be set, for everyone to understand them, agree on them, and then move forward and implement them.
It's also come up in the discussions, the importance of performance measurement. And I think, you know, one reason I was asked to talk about efficiency is there's a feeling on the part of citizens sometimes that the job's not always getting done. Can you give an example of how you would apply performance measurement in the city? Is there a program or a city function where you think we could add measures or enhance measures that already exist?
Certainly. The city charter tells us that we have 3 fundamental responsibilities: to deliver water, pick up the trash, and public safety. And we clearly have the federally mandated consent decrees in the water department. And I think that is probably the department that receives some of the best scrutiny around. If for no other reason, there's a federal judge that asks us every quarter how we're doing and if we are meeting our obligations. And so I think the Department of Watershed Management is the best place for us to take a look and make sure that we are meeting all of the obligation that the feds have required us to meet as a city. So the performance measures there are handled by the Office of Program Management. They tell us on a daily basis if we are meeting our obligations for each and every one of the capital projects and upgrade projects that are going on from a sewer and water perspective. And I think that is a perfect area where we could review and do even better.
I guess you've mentioned some of the analytical capacity in that answer, but in a whole wide range of issues, I mean, essentially when you talk about managing a city today, it's a knowledge business in many respects. Does Atlanta have the analytical capacity it needs to assess and improve performance on a broad scale?
We have some of the analytical capacity here in the city, but I would say I am never going to turn down help from the private sector, and I'm a child of the private sector. I worked there for over 30 years, and so I would reach into the private sector. Public-private partnerships are the model that has worked extremely well in the city of Atlanta. The Office of Program Management does a good job, but that doesn't mean that they can't be supplemented and complemented. And so I look forward, and I have told many a supporter when they say, I'm going to help you get elected. And I have said to them, I want to have you help me govern. You don't go and sit and take a chair after the mayor is elected. You need to stay engaged. And so in this type of environment, particularly for watershed, for example, I think it's going to take more than one department to make sure that we get it done. So we will be seeking as much help as we think is appropriate and that we need.
Do you see developing some sort of a budget analyst role or an analyst role in the city where more people would be working on looking for doing the job better?
Oh, absolutely, and I don't know if it'd be in watershed, but my first thought was for finance. I have already talked with several individuals in the community about having a CFO council, which would be a group that would help our CFO in the city from the private sector, that would help our CFO from the city, number one, help people have confidence that what we're doing in the finance department is appropriate. We want to be as transparent as we possibly can, but we also want to have as many eyes, professional eyes on what we're doing as we can, because we are in a financial crisis, and so it's all hands on deck. So at a minimum, those folks have agreed to come on in an advisory capacity, pro bono, not with a charge to the city.
You've mentioned employee performance already as well, but how do you develop a city culture focused on performance? It has to come from the employees themselves. In other words, you can check on them, you can measure what they do, but when they don't want to do right, it's very hard to keep track of them.
You fire them. When they don't perform, you fire them. But I think it starts at the top. You've got to set a good example as mayor for the kind of culture that you want at City Hall. It's a culture of service. It's one that says we are here, in fact, to do the people's business every day. There's no time for fun and games. We have a job to do. And so what I would tell you is there are many good people at City Hall, but like in any business, in the private sector, the public sector, or in the nonprofit sector, there are those who are not willing to do the job and do it well. They drag down the rest of the team, and so when that happens, you have to eliminate that drag. The culture has to be set by the leader, the mayor, the commissioners of those departments that are in question, and then we have to execute the goals that we set out together. And when those are not done, you have to change out the team members. In sports, when they don't get the goal scored, you put in another quarterback, right? So that's what we'll do. We'll put in another team member.
When I was developing these questions, I did some searches on the City of Atlanta site for words like performance, and I got an odd collection of hits back. What do you think about sharing performance data with the citizens of Atlanta? I mean, how can we make this real for people so that not just employees understand what needs to be done, but that the citizens themselves understand that the job is getting done?
I think maybe you didn't read my website, because we talk about Accountability Atlanta and putting up a website that in fact does have the performance metrics for each department listed there and how we're measuring against those performance metrics on an ongoing basis. So I agree that the public should have heads up at all times, or at their leisure, be able to understand where we are department to department on a website that they can access 24/7. So I am very comfortable with that.
That sounds great. I think the challenge of doing that is that the information has to be understandable to people.
So it has to be in English.
It has to be smartly done.
We understand, and so we may need some translators. We understand. I need a translator when I'm talking sometimes to the watershed management people. Anytime you have a technical issue, you need translation. And so yes, it needs to be clear and crisp for those citizens who are trying to understand how their tax dollars are being invested, because we want them to know that they're getting their money's worth every day. Does us no good to have it in some technical jargon that doesn't mean anything to anybody but the technocrats at City Hall.
Do you think there's people who can do? Well, I guess that's time. Thank you.
The answer is yes, there are people who can do that.